Welcome to Time is Not on Your Side with your host, board-certified litigation attorney Robert Eckard. In every episode, we'll hear from other attorneys, accountants, and other professionals who can impact the success of your litigation. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, roberteckardlaw.com. Now here's the host of Time is Not on Your Side, Rob Eckard.
Welcome to another episode of Time is Not on Your Side. I'm Rob Eckard, board certified business litigation attorney and government investigation specialist. The show is focusing on topics and people that you probably will not hear on one platform. Today's title, Hiring a Private Investigator. Today we're going to talk about what types of cases our private investigator guest has that he takes, criminal, civil, divorce cases, witness interviews and locating witnesses, surveillance and asset investigations, and employee investigations. We're going to dovetail off of those topics to talk more about them. Good morning, John.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. This is John Hubbard, and he is the president and CEO of Hubbard Investigations and a private investigator. John is a former law enforcement officer with the sheriff's office here in Pinellas County with 25 years experience in law enforcement at that agency and 37 years in investigative experience overall. John is a Florida board certified investigator, which there's only about 50, I understand, in the state of approximately 8,000 licensed investigators. So John is at a level beyond that most investigators have. John is a licensed U.S. Coast Guard master captain and is a certified scuba diver for over 40 years, which means he and his team also conduct surveillance on the water, use boats and anywhere in the Bahamas and Caribbean included. John's a member of the Florida Association of Licensed Investigators, the National Council of Investigation and Security Services, and offers a full range of investigative services within the Tampa Bay area, and I would suspect nationwide and worldwide if necessary. Hubbard Investigations, their investigators are experienced, licensed, and many of them are retired state and law enforcement officers, so that you can rely upon their expertise given their level of training. John, did I miss anything?
Well, we'll get into it as you start breaking down. No.
Okay. Well, thanks for being here today, John. And let's just jump right into it. So the viewers want to know, what do I do to hire an investigator? And some of my viewers will be lawyers. They'll be just regular folks watching the podcast. So some of the types of cases you handle include criminal cases, civil cases, and divorce cases. What do you do with those types of cases when a client comes to you, whether it's a lawyer or a person that has a lawsuit or a matter that they need a private investigator for?
Well, so obviously we do an array. We do everything from simple background checks to murder investigations and everything in between. So, regardless of whatever their need is, we are a one-stop shop.
Well, let's talk about criminal cases. So What are the types of things that you might be consulted on or just referred to for possible retention in the criminal context?
Okay, so let me just kind of make it clear that there's a real difference between being a defense attorney and a private investigator. Okay, a defense attorney is going to represent you and find whatever defense they can for you. Our job as an investigator is actually to uncover the truth, whatever that may be. So,
well, we are too, John.
Okay, well, I'm in a little different boat. So what the deal is, we just uncover. A good example is law enforcement, from my experience, is not interested in any exculpatory evidence that may be out there against your client. They either don't want to know about it or they're not going to entertain and look and investigate it, even if it's on their plate. We are going to get that. And, we have a reputation, and we're going to get that evidence if it exists and give it to you, so the attorney for your client can use it to defend and use it to present it to the prosecutor. A lot of times get these things dropped or reduced prior to it going to a trial. And God forbid if it goes to trial, you're going to have an expert come in there and testify as to what we actually got.
I mean, no one probably better than you as a former law enforcement officer with decades of experience understands the concept that you just conveyed. And of course, law enforcement, they're taught, right, to write reports and of course the reports are made after they've conducted their investigation typically, or it's ongoing, but then they write a report. And I'm not insinuating impropriety, but it's typically reports, as you indicated, are not written in a way to benefit a defendant or target, right? I mean, is that typically your experience?
So cops are real people, and they're supposed to be objective, but unfortunately, many times they're subjective. And when they've decided in their mind what they believe occurred, that report's going to reflect their opinion. That's my opinion. They're going to have whoever they think is guilty or not guilty, the report is going to reflect that and any evidence that supports their belief. Unfortunately, there could be a whole nother side that never gets presented.
Well, there typically is, right?
Well, that's reality. But
I mean, what you just talked about is something I like to call like conscious, not conscious blindness, but conscious bias, right? So they're geared in a way to follow this path, and although not everyone, but they are written in a way that these reports or these investigations get on a track that they don't want to consider maybe what might be favorable evidence to the accused, and I would say that most law enforcement and prosecutors, if they receive that information, they certainly will want to know about it. And so sometimes
I would agree. And that's one reason we love video cameras, because the video cameras tell exactly what took place. And many times you will get, and you'll get a police report and read it, and it will be in contradiction to what we actually witnessed on video. So,
how big is that, John, in your business?
Unfortunately, it's a big deal. Unfortunately, I think that it's cops are kind of like teachers and attorneys. There's good ones and there's bad ones. For the most part, we have great law enforcement, especially here in the United States and here in Tampa Bay. For the most part, of course, there's a bad apple here and there, but for the most part, we have great law enforcement, and they're well trained, and they're there's a checks and balances so that they can't just be a rogue cop, so to speak. And if they are, that typically doesn't last very long.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you.
Cop will vet that out and notify the supervision of that agency and take care of that. So for the most part, we have great law enforcement in Tampa Bay. That's my experience. I'm born and raised here, and I love law enforcement here. I don't agree with everything, and I'll just say this right on the record. I don't like going against and showing that a cop lied. But if he does, he does. I'm going to stand for the truth. But
well, certainly bringing it to, and of course, I believe that the reason we have such quality law enforcement here in the state of Florida, it all starts with our chief executive, our governor, and
absolutely
probably the political climate in this state is one of zero tolerance. We have some very good executive law enforcement officers throughout the state and in the federal offices too. That it's a law and order state, and it starts from the top down. But as you said, your job is to help both the accused or the defense attorney or the attorney, even if it's not a criminal case, to find or help find other evidence or witnesses or witness statements. So some of the cases that you deal with, in whether we transition into the civil arena, what are some of the things that a person or a lawyer might hire you for, your company for, in the civil context?
The civil or the criminal? Back to the criminal for a minute. Let's just take so I did a murder case locally in the last couple of years right here. And we were told right up front that that we had an uphill climb, that the guy was not getting off, yada, yada, yada. Bottom line was he got a no info. All charges were dropped. But here's the deal: what the cops didn't do. The cops did not, in that particular case, they did not go out and interview those that were had evidence and testimony against this defendant. No, not against the alleged victim, the deceased in this case, which turned out to be a really bad guy. But we obtained sworn written statements from 20 people. Well, that's a big deal. The cops didn't do it. To me, a murder investigation, they don't get any tougher than that. You should gather everything that's available, or at least attempt to. We're not the end all be all, but if our team can go out and do it, so could they have. And in that case, I believe they were biased against turned out to be the defendant, who had no criminal record whatsoever. And we ended up proving a stand your ground case for something that they denied. Like I said, all charges were dropped. So we go out and gather, even like a simple thing as a car crash. There's going to be, and I'll tell you, my experience on car crashes, 50% of them are completely inaccurate, right on the surface, on the face of it, whether it's what happened, who's in there, or whatnot. So finding witnesses and obtaining, especially sooner than later, sooner than later, finding videos from nearby businesses and stuff that can show exactly what took place. But we have to get on that bus within that first week, or your chances of getting that evidence is gone.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because timing is everything. I've tried timing in life is everything, right? And so, if someone's considering hiring you, or a lawyer is considered about hiring you for the client, or the client's consider, they need to do it quickly, and at least to determine if there's evidence to be preserved, right?
Yeah, absolutely, because that's key. So again, the bigger the case, the more important that is. Okay. I had another one that was this couple were both charged with rape, and it was very well publicized. They lost their jobs. They got kicked out of their residences. They actually fled the state, the whole 9 yards. Bottom line, when we got to the end and everything sorted out, got the interviews and got the physical evidence, DNA, everything, all charges were dropped on both parties. But
it's pretty shocking and quite remarkable. And, I know these types of cases that you've mentioned are not easy cases, and they require substantial, probably, financing and assets to have a proper defense. But the key is to get on it early and get you involved so that you can start working for this client. What about civil cases, John? What type of things do you do for lawyers or for folks that want to hire? Because sometimes lawyers aren't involved. They just call a private investigator.
So there's a lot. So, a lot of private investigators, this is kind of hard to believe. It was for me. I'd say close to maybe half of a good portion of private investigations firms don't do surveillance, because it's technical. It takes that's probably the number one reason I'd let people go, because if they can't do that very well, then you're no value to me. But we do it very well, and I've even taught the surveillance course on the state level to our investigators that are in the state of Florida. So there is a technique, there is an expertise, and it takes equipment, it takes training, and it takes a lot of different things. So in surveillance, we do it on divorce case, infidelity, whether they're married or not. People even though we're a no-fault state, people want to know, and they want the evidence to know that their partner cheated.
Well, let me add this. We may be a no-fault state, but, in the divorce arena, as you're probably aware, if one spouse is having an affair and spending money on a girlfriend or boyfriend, then the issue of marital waste comes into play in the divorce, and the spouse, the non-cheating spouse, if you will, is going to try to impose that money the cheating spouse has on the equitable distribution of the marital estate, because they're saying that you're going out and spending money on your boyfriend, girlfriend that was mine, right?
Correct.
And so
if we can go back and prove how, you might have just found out about it and think that, hey, this has only been going on for 2, 3, 4 weeks, and then we get involved and go, well, guess what? We can prove that couple has been together for 3 years. Oh my gosh! Well, guess what? They spent a lot of marital assets on that other partner, And a lot of times we can unveil that too. We do financial records, a lot of different things that, like I said, we're a one-stop shop. So we have access to doing a lot of things that, some PI companies just don't have it. So also back on even though we're a no-fault state, when it comes to your children being involved, minor children, and the custody of those, well, guess what? If one partner is cheating, or if they're every time that they get the kids, it's their turn to watch them, whether they're the weekend warrior or they have 50% custody. If they're continually dropping those children off at the family or a babysitter, that makes a big difference to the courts. You have custody of the kids, yet you're really not watching them. You're giving them to somebody else to watch, when in fact the other partner has asked for them, has the ability. And so that plays a huge role in whether there's going to be a 50-50 custody.
Well, and of course that translates to the child support payments. I mean, if a spouse gets the kids and only wants the kids because the number of overnights establish a certain threshold for child support or additional child support, but they're not really spending time with the kids. They're just taking the kids to get that additional child support. Then I think that's a huge.
That's the number one driver for why, I'll call it the weaker spouse, whichever one it is, wants the kids 50% of the time, because it drastically reduces the amount of child support that they're obligated to pay. And so that's driving force. They would rather give that money to a sitter or allege to give it to a family member who is actually, let's say, a grandparent's watching the kids for free, but that they're going to produce an affidavit to the courts that they're paying that parent $800 or $1,000 a month to try to offset their responsibilities, which we can usually defunct that pretty easily.
That's valuable information. John, talk about a little bit, and I know I've hired you, our firm has hired you in the past to do some technology, use you for technology purposes, doing bug sweeps and cyber security investigations. Tell the listeners and the folks watching what those things are.
So there's a big disparity. Again, you call somebody and say, I think there's a listening device, in my residence or my car. And, many times we find it. But a lot of these places will say, because they don't have the expertise that we have, they'll go, oh, yeah, we can do that. And what they really have done is went on to Amazon or somewhere on the internet, and they just bought some device that will allegedly pick up all of this stuff for $1,000. Well, I have one of those too. They're absolutely worthless. I call them skittle finders. That's about all they're good for. Our team has over $100,000 worth of equipment that is really needed if you're going to do this job right, as you well know.
I've seen it.
Yeah. If you want to do it right, we have a team of 3 guys that come out with a truck full of different equipment, and every one of them have a different job task that they run that in there. And that's what it takes. You got to keep up with the technology today. It's constantly changing, and you need to be able to find it. So if there's a listing device that's, behind the wall switch on your wall, you don't want somebody cutting into it. But if there's something there, you need to know about it. Where a lot of these guys, they're not going to find anything. They'll come through, sweep your house and go, yeah, well, there's nothing here.
I remember a case that we used you on. It involved a high-level federal international narco trafficking case, and it was where the feds were targeting a client, and your team came in and not only did the interior, but I believe you guys did a significant amount of exterior.
And we did all of the vehicles and the exterior, patio, pool area. And the client you're speaking of had a very beautiful, nice, a nice estate, really, and he needed, because of what he was looking at, he needed everything done. And I'll tell you, by the way,
just to know, you were part of that team, and the client was never indicted, which was a massive victory for us. John, talk to me about. I've talked to you before. I've consulted with you. Some of my practice involves representing parents in international child abduction cases. In some of those cases, they're all very difficult. But the problem is when I get a referral from the Secretary of State, the Hague Convention folks, they're looking for the parent, maybe a foreign parent from another country, looking for their child here in the United States who's with the abducting parent. And we don't know where they are. And we got to find them to get them within the jurisdiction of the court, to have U.S. Marshals go out, all that kind of thing. But I've consulted with you, and you have a way, if we know the spouse who's abducted the child, you have a way to try to locate that spouse through a cell phone, correct?
We have the best, it's not just a cell phone, it's any device. We just have gotten in the last 6 months one of the best tools we've ever gotten in this industry. And prior to that, my information is only the feds had access to this information. And so it's actually you hear about the attempted assassination that was on the president, that Mr. Crooks. They were just asking in Congress, did they do what's called a geolocating on his cell phone? By the way, it's legal. And what it does is we can identify so when you've got a cell phone or a tablet or any device, every time you use that, whether you're making a phone call, you're logged into Facebook, Instagram, it doesn't matter. Your device is broadcasting its location all the time. Okay. And we have access to a couple of guys from the NSA that retired from there that wrote this program that can capture that data. And I can show, and it can go back as far as 3 years. I can show you 2.5 years ago, you were sitting at a Starbucks outside of Charlotte. And it's just amazing. So with this information, going back to your case, this international case, I don't care if the guy is in Colombia. I don't care if he's in Canada or China. Once I identify his device, and there's a process of doing that. It's not as simple as just putting in a phone number. As a matter of fact, this system does not identify phone numbers. It makes up names for these devices. But anyway, once we have extrapolated your device out of there, we can go back then and look and see where he's been. So if he's got a job, we'll see where he's going to work. What homes he's going to, if he's traveling internationally. I just found a guy that he was in Mexico City. It doesn't matter where they're at on the globe. This thing captures it. It's expensive. Okay. So it's not for the faint of wallet. If people, unfortunately, a lot of our services, they're expensive. Law enforcement, local law enforcement, in my opinion, doesn't even have access to this stuff. They could come to somebody like me or the group that we use to get it, but it's very expensive. It's thousands of dollars, but it's cheap compared to what you're going to get.
You bring up a good point, and you say expensive, and of course that's a relative term, right? Yeah. I mean, it depends upon what you're trying to do and what you're trying to protect. But when someone is looking for their child in an abduction case,
a few $1,000s is cheap. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, to be able to locate that, because that's the biggest thing. I had a call yesterday, a case referred to me from the United States State Department, the Hague Convention folks, and a man from England. Looking for his son, and they believe that he's here in the Middle District of Florida. And so the process begins, of course, to attempt to gather as much information before, of course, if we can't isolate where they're located, then, I've got to use a private investigator. It's interesting because I had a previous guest on a previous episode by the name of Alan Tomczak, works for a company called Cellbrite, and he does the kind of the government side of things in his intel work there. But what you've just said is the effect of a digital footprint being left, whatever you do, whatever devices you have or wherever you
do
go,
that as well. Yep.
It's virtually hard to get away from. Get away from that. Right?
So I can find that guy for you. The forensic imaging that you're just talking about, Cellbrite. We also have a forensic team that's separate from the cyber guys that images computers, laptops, Apple devices, cell phones. And what's nice about it, and I'll just repeat it for those who don't know, even let's just say it doesn't matter what kind of case it is. If the person that owns the device has been deleting their messaging and their videos and their pictures, typically it doesn't matter. We're going to bring that back. All the things that have been gone, there's still that image, if you will, is still on your phone. You just can't see it because you've deleted it from its public view. But our forensic guys are going to go in there. Like I had a phone recently. I looked at his phone and it said 2,000 pictures. When the image report came back, there were over 20,000 pictures. So he'd been deleting everything, but there it says. I don't want to get into the technical aspects of why it would be or would not be there. There's a lot of false information, and I don't want to get into that. But there is, generally speaking, even if they deleted it, we're gonna recover it and bring it back.
Yeah, the forensics behind those types of things is interesting. And recently I had a federal case involving the FBI's forensic folks, and I learned throughout that investigation that I was involved with the FBI that, and I had my own forensic IT specialist specifically. I learned some things I didn't know that a phone does in terms of creating duplicate images, and to prevent those images from being counted multiple times instead of one time, and they're maybe counted 2 or 3 times, which affects the offense level. So having someone know that kind of thing is important for the defense, and of course the person that may be a target or anybody else that needs that information.
And law enforcement is getting trained, unfortunately, by folks like our team. By the way, the FBI uses my cyber team because they're that good. You know, they're also certified ethical hackers, and they are the best of the best. And what's great about us is we get the information much faster than any subpoenas, you know, that these guys are trying to do.
Good point.
Same thing on the bank records. You know, Secret Service might send out a subpoena to a bank for records. I can get it in less than a week, typically. They may not get it for 60 days. And our information is dead on the money, which they've vetted us many times to find that out.
Again, getting to the fact that time is important, right? It
is, especially
just like my show says, time is not on your side. You need to act fast.
If you've been scammed, and there's a lot of these scammers that'll take your websites and your stuff hostage. By the way, you can call law enforcement if you want to, and you should, but they're not going to be able to do anything for you. Typically, the guy that hijacked you is in India or somewhere else, and he don't care about your federal guy in the U.S. He does not care about your local law enforcement. You do care about getting your website back up, and you are going to have to pay, unfortunately. The deal is that ransom that he's requesting of maybe $5 million, you're going to need an expert that knows how to deal with those people, that can find out at what level they're at and negotiate that price down to something that's more affordable, and then use our guys to prevent yourself from being hijacked again. You know, a
lot of the stuff we're talking about, this is real world stuff. And
this is
it's almost as if, you know, we could be talking about or watching a Tom Cruise movie about all of this type of these threats, these high level intellectual property issues, the forensics of IT. But sometimes you're hired for a relatively routine job, I guess. I know I've hired you in the past when we were looking to go out and seize an asset and locate vehicles that had liens on them that we were going to repossess under a writ of replevin. You do that too. You follow the vehicle. You can tell me where it is, how long it's been there, where it's going. I mean, this is just valuable stuff that folks can use your service for, that I've used your service for.
And in that type of a case, when you legally have a right to that vehicle, so to speak, or that asset, then we can legally go attach a tracking device on it, so that if it moves before we actually apprehend it and recover it, well, then guess what? Then we'll know where they took it. And even if we need a court order at that point, we can get it. We know where it's at, and we don't lose the asset. Yeah, and that sort of thing. And on that same thing, you know, people want to use GPS tracking devices in infidelity, and they can do whatever they want, you know, but there's a law that they got to follow. We rent them out, and you know, and we tell people what the law is, and if they use it in the manner they should, then they're good. And if they don't, well, that's on them. That's not going to be on us.
Well, a person's always allowed to track their own car, right?
Of course, yeah. Well, most of the time you can. Yes.
Yeah. What about witness interviews, John? I mean, I can't tell you how important witness interviews are when how it's conducted, maybe where it's conducted, who's around while it's conducted. I mean, you've been doing this for 37 years.
Yeah. Well, witness interviews are a big deal for a couple of reasons. Number one, they may tell me or one of my investigators something completely contrary than what's in the report. So either they didn't report it correctly or the person's changing their story. Either way, it doesn't matter to me. I want to lock in whatever their story is. Whether they die, they run away, they want to change their story, we've got them locked in. And we attempt to get that recorded. If they will, they've got to consent to that. We'd like to record it. If not, maybe they'll do it in writing. But we want to get them locked in to whatever their story is. And a lot of times these witnesses will identify another witness that we can go talk to. And, that they were at the scene. They go, yeah, well, my niece was here too, and, she's 21. She was in the back, whatever it is. You just got yourself another witness that law enforcement didn't have. When you're talking about car crashes, the cops, they don't have the time to go chase down everybody in the world that you think saw whether you had the green light or not. They put what they can gather quickly, they put it in the report, and they're on their way. If it's a big deal and it's going to be a payout, there's some real injuries, somebody's going to hire a team like us to find out what the truth is.
I know I have friends that are PI lawyers, and they hire private investigators if they're already not on staff for their case very often, because as you said, officers don't have time typically in those types of injury cases to go beyond the limited scope of the crash scene. And so unless, there may be some other cause like alcohol or drugs or something like that, but your services are often used in the civil arena, in the personal injury arena as well.
Especially, so now that's just the typical ones. Now let's start getting into some bigger ones. So I also do, maybe you've got a manslaughter charge involved, regardless of what sides of that fence you're on. You're going to want, if it's available, the black boxes evaluated. You're
talking about like a vehicular manslaughter.
Yes, I am. Yeah. I'm talking about car crashes still. Yeah. So if it's something there's big injuries or death, and maybe your client's looking at spending the rest of their life in prison, and maybe they're actually innocent, believe it or not, but getting the true evidence from these black boxes, getting that, it will give you the speed at the time of impact. It will let you know whether they were accelerating or decelerating before the wreck, when and how hard they applied the brakes. There's a lot, when the airbags deployed from which area of the car, so where you were hit first, all of those different things. And then you look into getting a reconstruction expert if need be. I just had one recently. The black box, man, just in my opinion, just totally blew the case away for the cops. They don't have a case.
I can't tell you how important it is. And most lay people don't understand the nuances in a case like that. I just read in the news yesterday, this 21-year-old young boy has been arrested for vehicular homicide. And it was a result of him driving his mother's new Porsche. And the car crashed. His friend, the passenger, was killed. Unfortunately, tragic event. And this young man, of course, gets out when law enforcement and paramedics arrives, and he's hysterical. He's making statements such as, "I killed my friend. I shouldn't have been driving this fast." Just very what would appear to be incriminating statements by this young man. He was just indicted, but as I read the article, and of course this was a FHP investigation, I wonder, people don't understand what corpus means, and that there has to be a corpus before there can be use of the defendant's statement. So if in your case, the case we're talking about here, if for some reason there was an intervening cause for that vehicle to crash, it could have been weather conditions. It could have been road debris. It could have been malfunction of the car. While this kid feels tremendously horrible, understandably so, actually, it may not have been a willful, wanton disregard under the statute for the life, limb, and safety of his passenger. Even though now he's charged, this 21-year-old kid, with vehicular homicide or vehicular manslaughter. You're telling the listeners, listen, there's more to it than this. Accident reconstruction, skid marks, stopping, brakes, black box, road conditions, all these things, surveillance, all these things. You would get involved in that.
Absolutely. And you've got to have, and you as the attorney want the facts. You want to know what really happened. Because unfortunately, and I'm going to say this, clients don't always tell the truth to their attorneys. They tell them what they want them to defend and what they want the attorney to believe. But to me, your attorney, your preacher, and your doctor, you need to tell the truth. It's all confidential. Tell the truth, because guess what? If your attorney hires me, I am going to bring the truth.
But the truth from the client's perspective may be like this young man. He believes he was the result because of his driving, the result of the car hitting that guardrail and flipping over in the tree, which it may be, but we don't know what the forensics of the car may show. In other words, was there a tire blowout? Was there mechanical problems with the car? Did the brakes at some point impact? And then if you have causation that's a problem, that's kind of the Jenga peg for a
but
case.
you've got to have experts to be able to, get in there and evaluate that and
get
be
on
able to testify to it.
What about employee investigations, John? What you do some of that stuff? Of
course we do. Anything from their shoplifting basis. By the way, shoplifting theft, employee theft is it's over 85% of theft from any retail store is employees. Whether they're carrying it out the back door or they're allowing their friends to come in and they mark it down, something that's $1,000, they sell them for $80. Because they're the cash register. That happens too. So employee theft that's where your theft is happening. It's not typically, unless you see this stuff now where, some of these idiot, I'm just going to say these idiot governments are allowing shoplifting that's unreal. And we're not doing anything about it. Now, I'm not the guy to call. I'm not. Yeah, if I'm the sheriff there, that's not. You're not leaving here for free.
Yeah, right.
Your ability to walk will be different from the time you came into my store to the time you walked out.
I think that's the climate, at least here in the state of Florida and more of your red states.
I have done, but the bigger stuff that people call me for is not usually that kind of employee. They usually call me for embezzlement. A guy's been in business for a few years. He goes, man, I never really was that big, but I was making X amount of money 4 years ago. And now I'm actually doing more. I see more going on, but my bottom line is smaller. What's going on? And then they suspect somebody. And I'm working one right now, on the other coast. And that's what it is. It actually, they had two. And when one employee sees that if one employee, they learn that one is getting away with it, then somebody else tries to duplicate it. Then you might have two of them going on in concert, but they're not sharing their money, but they're both ripping you off.
Just a little skimming.
So you might have to get a forensic accountant involved to begin. I'm sure you know about those to find out what their plan, their MO was, how they did it, and then we can come in and just blow that away. And I'll throw this out there. I'm not a cop anymore, but I tell you what, I obtained confessions, as you know, as a cop at a higher rate than any cop I've ever met. And so I still have that expertise, even though I'm not a cop and I can't put you in jail. I still have the ability to talk to bad people.
And that's your skill set.
But my point to that is I typically will get a confession from that employee before the cops get involved, and then I can hand it to them. They're more apt to take it on the silver platter, as we call it. It's all wrapped up, ready to go. And what cop doesn't want that case where they've already got a signed confession right here and all the evidence to back it up?
Absolutely.
They don't have to do it then.
Money well spent, right?
It is. And
then hopefully, if the person is prosecuted, then the client doesn't have to sue the defendant. That they get prosecuted as an order condition of their probation. They've got to pay restitution.
Well,
including how much money they paid you.
And depends on what agency you deal with. In that particular case that I'm talking about, it was about $350,000 that this employee and her spouse swindled from this company, small company. Well, the local jurisdiction, and it was not Pinellas, by the way, but it was a local jurisdiction, was not jumping on it to take it. When I had it wrapped up, I had the whole confession done. They weren't jumping on. We ended up giving it to the feds. And this mother, She wasn't a single. She was married, never been to jail before. They gave her 5 years in prison. They took a condo that they believe that they bought with this money, and they took the condo and gave it to my client, along with other. A lot of times restitution's ordered, it's never paid. Well, here was a condo that was already paid for. The feds, they got crazy power. They just seized the condo and gave it to my client. So
I've been in many federal cases where property is seized, be it houses, cars, jewelry.
The feds are incredible.
Many of them.
All the local law enforcement, in my opinion, they love the feds because of their powers. Whether it's overtime money or the way that they seize assets, and then they disperse it amongst the agencies that assisted in the case. I love that.
Yeah, very, very valuable, very, very, very helpful. Let me ask you, John, as we're winding down here, are there any trends that you see happening or coming in the investigative arena that you're involved in? Is there anything new or anything that you'd like to share with folks?
One of the big things, and I know we really didn't discuss this prior, but it's actually in the dating arena. There are so much, these dating sites there's thousands of them. And look, I'm a private investigator. I get on those sites. Look, the majority are fake. They're fake, whether they're catfishing, putting up photos that are from 10 years ago and filtered, or the bottom line is what they'll do is once you get a phone, I always say before you date, investigate, get the phone number from them. Call a PI like me. It's something cheap to run a phone number, $10 to try to identify who it is, or if it's even a real phone. There's voice IPs. Everybody's got them. It used to be only the drug dealers and cheaters had them. Now everybody's got them. There's a legitimate purpose for them. But
good point.
If the guy's using them, guy or girl, in a voice IP in a dating, guess what? Then there's a transparency there that needs to be had, and you can save yourself a lot of money. I hate to tell you, people today are still giving up tens of thousands of dollars in the dating arena with these people that come up with all of these elaborate stories. They develop a bond with you and then tell you about how, their niece is dying, and they need money for this and that right away, and they'll pay you back and yada, and people are giving it.
Well, there's a movie, Tinder Swindler.
Well, it is crazy, but it's still happening, and it's getting worse and worse because these people are making it look to be so believable. So the dating arena is just off the chart. As far as that, other than that, our technology has gotten so much better. This geolocating service, it's phenomenal by itself. To come to me and say, you know what, John, I think my wife is cheating or my husband is cheating. I don't know who they're seeing, but I think they are because, I always say, don't ignore your gut. We got that sixth sense that God gave you. Don't ignore that gut feeling. But let's find out. Let's vet it out and find out what we can see, what is real and not. And so, let's just say, for just sake of argument, it's $5,000 for a week's worth of surveillance. I can get you 3 months, 6 months, a year's worth of intelligence from this geolocating deal that will tell every place your partner has been. It's crazy. And it's just invaluable. If you need to know, I'm the guy to call. You're
saving yourself a lot for the future problems that you might be encountering if you don't do it. But that's good information. John, I know what I appreciate, you send me words of wisdom from biblical scripture and quotes, and I really appreciate that, man. And I know you derive strength from that, as do I. And I just wanted to share that with our listeners, that you love the word, and you also derive your strength from the word, and I think that's important. So
that's our personal side, and yeah, I feel like without that, I'm worthless.
Yeah. So
I don't know what else.
I just wanted to throw that out there. Well, listen, man, this has been a great episode. What I want you to do is, if you will, give the listeners or the people, folks watching, your website, tell them twice, and your phone number twice. Although they will see the show, they can find you. But what's your website and
we're
what's your
both
phone
very
number?
simple. HubbardInvestigations.com. That's Hubbard, 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 like old Mother Hubbard. Hubbard Investigations with an S.com.
And what's the best way to get in touch with you, John?
You can go on there and fill out the info sheet, and there's also a link to click to talk to Investigator. And then my phone number, the work number is 727-495-6565. So 727-495-6565. And you can call it or text it.
Those folks that are listening, I've used John. I continue to use John. And he's thorough, he's diligent, he's responsive, all the things I look for when hiring an investigator for my needs. John, thank you for today. This has been another episode of Time Is Not On Your Side. Please stay tuned for additional episodes. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and all major social media platforms. Remember, victory comes to those who are relentless in the pursuit of greatness. Till next time. Thanks.
Thank you.
You've been tuning into Time Is Not On Your Side with your host, board-certified litigation attorney, Robert Eckard. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, roberteckardlaw.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.